thank you for being here. I'm sure many of you know as much or more about the Lanier Library as I do. I've learned an awful lot in all the years I've been. I can say my staff, between Sandra and Claire, who know all the members so well, and Lynn, who was the president of the organization before she took her job there, I can ask them just about anything and they can tell me. And then a previous director, Vonda Cron, many of you know, and then Nancy Ernst, who comes into the library still regularly. And I have questions all the time and I ask them, and they're so generous to share information. I'll say, do you remember this, or did you do this? And somebody always knows the answer, so it's been great having all those people. And then just our members, they teach me something every day. When I was writing something today, I thought, I was trying to remember before I started talking, but I asked them something about what I was going to say tonight, and somebody knew the answer, and I was like, it's amazing. They're amazing. This is an amazing community that we live in. Welcome, and I hope I'm not going to knock on my things. I have learned, when I lived in this community for 17 years, and until I worked in the Lanier Library, I was not a member. Really, I was shortly right before I started working there. I don't know why, because I was a librarian. I worked in the Polk County Library when we first moved here. I worked in public libraries in Charleston. I was a school librarian. All I can say is I just didn't have time, or I didn't have need, because I had other books to read and other places to be in libraries. When I got here, I had no idea of the history of this place. And some of you might know of the two Lanier Library anniversary books that they have. You can see I use them a lot. Every time I want to know something, I go to one of these books, and I usually can find it. It's amazing. So I have all these annotations all over it and labels that I go back and find things. The Lanier, let me see if I can get this going. The Lanier Library is the oldest civic organization in Tryon, founded in 1889 as a club that would be the source of intellectual and cultural stimulation for the community. The idea for the library came about when three Leduc sisters, Miss Mary, Miss Lucy, and their sister, Miss Elizabeth Boardman, ran out. They were here from Minnesota, I believe, for the summer, and or winter, I guess they would have been here for the winter. Were renting a cottage at the corner of Laurel and Embry Street, and they ran out of things to read and were basically bored. So their two friends came over for tea that day, Mrs. Thomas Knott and Miss Amelia Spence, and they came up with the idea, oh, we just need a library in town. So they canvassed the then 24 houses that were in the town of Tryon to ask people if they wanted to join this club to start a library. So they started the club first. And the first meeting, and I've been, for 2 years as a director, I've been telling the story backwards until I went back and was reading things and I was reading files and history. I've always told people that Miss Sidney Lanier's widow and her two sons lived across the street from them on, I think, Lanier Street, or Laurel Street, Lanier Street, I think. And that was when they started the library. She gave them the first two copies of his poetry books, and that was at the start of their library, so they named it after him. But I found in two places that at the first meeting, they voted to call it the Lanier Club. And I'm not sure if anybody knows this, because they met at the Laurels on Lanier Street, and they called it the Lanier Club. And Sidney Lanier's widow lived across the street, and so they decided, oh, we're going to name it after Sidney Lanier. So that after the first meeting, they went and told her they were going to do that, and that's when she gave them the poetry books. So I thought that was 2 years I've been telling people wrong. Oh, they named it after him because she gave them the first two books in their collection. But that's according to this. If anybody knows a different history than that, please let me know, because that's what these books say too. The first meeting, 38 women, so it's named for poet Sidney Lanier. The first meeting, 38 women, aged 14 to 71. I'm not sure why Mrs. Lanier wasn't there, if they had to go and ask her this. And then 24 houses in Tryon, 38 women came. Attended the first meeting on January 9th, 1889, to establish a club with the intent to procure a library for the town. Officers were chosen, including I have down to read that page if I have time, but I might run out of time. But one of the officers, the first group of officers was Mrs. Kenworthy, who was the critic. So she got to correct anybody's pronunciations and spellings and things at every meeting. That was be my job too. The first books were available to members of the Lanier Club starting on April 27th, 1890. Because so many residents left for the north in the summer, the club adjourned in June those first years and reconvened later in October. So it wasn't until October when they met that they voted to get a bookcase. Over its first 15 years, the Lanier's Club bookcase had many homes. The first bookshelf was housed in Methodist Church, which is where the Congregational Church now stands. And it wasn't that same building, though. It was a wooden building. It was a white wooden building. That's what I found. Was it one of those buildings that is still used and they just changed the exterior?
No.
No, it was a different building altogether. Okay. So that was the first one. Then it went to the post office on Trade and Maple Streets. And I stopped to tell what's her name in the post office today. The postmistress acted as a librarian. So she was also the postmistress and she checked out books. There was a large room over William Lucky's store, north of the post office on Trade, and then it went back to the post office. Then it moved to Mrs. Guffin's store, where the Women's Exchange was housed. Then it went to the Livingstone building, which one is that? Does anybody know? Do you know that one, Julia? Do you know which building that is? These were all on this book, and I wasn't sure some of these.
I know.
And then it went to upstairs in the Missildine building, which is where Major Strong's office was, and they had it there. And then it went upstairs at Orr's store until the fire at Orr's store, and everything was lost. Since they lost everything, and then they started their collection again, and it moved back to the Livingstone building. In 1900, the library, and I'll go back to the fire in Orr's store in just a minute. In 1900, established a traveling library via horse and buggy to nearby villages. So it went up to Lynn and down to Landrum in a horse and buggy. Weekly lectures in the members' homes became so popular that they were required to go to larger accommodations. So a lot of times they went to, sometimes they went to Opera House, but they went to churches and they went to the different bigger places because everybody couldn't fit in the houses anymore. In 19, oh, let me go back. I think I messed up there. Let's see. I'm going to skip that one because I think that's it. Well, I'm off one on my things. In 1900, the lot at the corner of Melrose Avenue and Chestnut Street was purchased from Charles E. Erskine. This following a gentleman's night at the Opera House celebrating the Lanier's 10th anniversary, where the idea for a permanent home was probably brought up because they were talking about this for a long time before then. So I'm sure they had this gentleman's night and decided, oh, we'll talk about this and maybe somebody will help us buy it. Miss Frances Wright was the president of the board from 1898 until 1900, and she had promised to pay for half of the cost of the lot if they could find a lot to buy. And after this gentleman's night, Charles Erskine called him up and said, I have this lot, I'll sell it to you. And she did indeed pay for half of it, and they raised the funds for the rest. The fire at Orr's store in 1904 destroyed the more than 700 books that they had in their collection by then. The store, the library, all its books, many of them autographed copies that couldn't be replaced, were destroyed. But the books were insured for $300, and people also gave gifts and money to help them buy and get new ones. So this added a renewed and more urgent desire to find a permanent place for the library. Members of the community provided much support because the club was recognized as a force for good. I'm going to go back to this in a minute. This is not my right one. And this is where I am now. And indeed, the library did play a real significant role in nearly all that was happening in Tryon at that time. The Tryon Cemetery in 1892, they had like $40 in their treasury, and they gave all of it to the to the cemetery to purchase the lot and have it built. And one of the things that said in the books was that they waited and waited and waited for the gentleman to lay out, and they kept telling people go and lay out the lots and lay out the plots and do the library, the cemetery, and it didn't get done for 4 years. So the women in their minutes, it says, so they decided then that they would just do it themselves. These are ladies to be reckoned with. It's really interesting. They had lots of public health initiatives, especially for tuberculosis between 1898 and 1900. They supported the Tryon schools before the PTA was active in the schools. They bought books and bought clothes for kids. They bought books for kids. They did all kinds of things before there was a PTA. The Women's Exchange enabled local women to earn money. So they had sort of a store within the store, I think, where they had things that people could buy, and they sold them there. They had town cleanup activities, especially at the depot and downtown. They had a real big campaign for no spitting on the streets and the spread of tuberculosis. Some realtors, group of realtors came in and put up a big sign by the depot, and they thought it was tacky, and they went to the county council or the town council and made them take it down, and they did take it down, so they must have really had some say in the things that went on. The tree and flower preservation, as well as a donation to the first school of forestry that was established by George Vanderbilt. They gave money for that. The tree and flower preservation also started the Tryon Garden Club. It had its roots in that. The Moonlight Schools helped secure funding. Started in 1915. Moonlight Schools were by buggies, went out to the rural areas for the people who were uneducated. They were called Moonlight Schools because they could only go if there was a moon, because they couldn't see otherwise. Some of them had lamps on the bottoms of their wagons, but a lot of them couldn't go if there wasn't a moon out because they couldn't see to get there. So I was out in all the rural areas. Harmon Field, I'd never seen that before until I was going back through things this last 2 weeks and found a thing where they helped procure writing up for things to get it from the Harmon Foundation. And I don't know how active they were. Maybe they just gave money, or maybe they wrote letters of support or what. Drama fortnightly that was held at the Lanier Library for years was the start of Tryon Little Theater. It's just amazing. The more I read, the more things I find, and it's like that they had things, they were supported. They gave all their money away, which, oh gosh, I wish we had that to do now. Let's see. In 1905, the Lanier Club was incorporated, and I'm not sure if they did that so they could build or what they had to do that for, but they voted on April 13th, 1905, and in June it was approved. And then they got the help of a small loan. A permanent home for the library was erected at the cost of $1,375 on the Melrose lot where it stands today. They borrowed $1,000 from the bank, plus many donations from the community came in for like the bricks and the wainscoting and the grading and the planting of the plants and all of that. And it opened to the public. I'll pass that around again. It opened to the general public in December of 1905, and the first meeting was held in their new building on December 21st, 1905. Let me see. I'm going to go back to my other ones here. I'm sorry. They're out of order. I did this 2 or 3 times, and I kept changing the slides, and I must have put the wrong one in here. Historically, the Lanier's programs included news from home and afar, music, theater, and people, as well as public interests such as programs on the tuberculosis programs. Their first programs were held at the Opera House on Melrose, now where Holy Cross Episcopal Church is. Now that was a totally different building also.
It was located where the old Episcopal Church parish house was.
Okay, all right. So all that. Popular programs included William Gillette giving an impersonation of his Hartford neighbor Mark Twain. John Burroughs, the American naturalist, was there and talked. The Peeties, Robert and Ilya and their son Donald, they all came and did programs for Louis Agassiz, my husband, I always said this name, my husband friend corrected me, so he knew who it was, on astronomy. And later, even more so, the Tryon residents, Jim and Tofflat gave a whole bunch of talks on all their travels around the world. And then the Nina Simone concerts, which that's probably the one most everybody knows about, although it wasn't so well known at the time. The piano recital was by Eunice Wayman, later known as Nina Simone. I looked for many, many months through books and files and minutes and trying to locate an actual account relating to the Eunice Wayman concert, or even Mrs. Mazanovich's recitals, thinking they had occurred numerous times after Nina Simone first began her lessons at age 6. This is simply based on her quote from her 1967 New York Times article saying that she hated those recitals at the Lanier Library, making it sound like it was more than one. The only reference I came across when I was looking for something else in my files, it's hard to see this, but I have a copy of this too, and they're all handwritten minutes. I'll pass these around to you. Where they were found in the annual minutes of the library in 1949, and her last name is spelled wrong, 2 different ways, but it's Eunice one time Hannon and Eunice Wagner one other time. She would have been 16 years old at that time, and was already in school in Asheville. And we know this is it because there was an actual newspaper article, which I'll also pass around, and a thing that says the piano recital with Eunice Wayman at the Lanier Library. So it was a big deal that they had an ad in the paper, but I couldn't find anything. That's the only time. She had been scheduled to do an Easter concert on April 6, 1949, which was then rescheduled for later in the summer, and ads did appear for the recital for July 31st, 1949. So I looked for that stuff and looked for when she was actually there and what happened, and because when Dre was here filming her movie, she came up to the library and she was asking, of course, you see all these accounts of when it happened and wanted to know where the piano was and when it happened and how old she was, and I said, I don't know, so that's what made me kind of start looking for it. And like I said, I was doing something totally different and came across this in a totally different time, out of nowhere. Let's see. Oh, now I gotta go for it again, sorry. Let's see where I left off. Library additions over the years. Of course, they had the original part of the library. If you've been in the library, most of you have, so I recognize most of you, is the original square part in the center where the main room is, and then the Holmes room, which is the room with a long table in it. That was the original building of the library. And then, of course, they outgrew those spaces and had to keep adding on. In 1927, a reading room was added as a tribute to the parents of James Holden. I'm going to read this because it says on page, give myself a note. As the number of books and library subscribers increased, it was obvious in 1926 that there must be some system of professional cataloging, and this would cost at least $800. The task was undertaken during the summer by Miss Mary Carpenter and Miss Fuller, 2 trained librarians among the club members. Then at the annual meeting, Miss Euphemia Holden announced that her brother James wished to give the library a much-needed reading room as a tribute to their parents. This, of course, would require remodeling of the building so that the room could be added, and there was still the cost of cataloging to be met. To meet the expenses, the Finance Committee was empowered to borrow $1,000 from the bank, but before the transaction could be completed, a delighted and grateful community had voluntarily subscribed $1,132 for the building of the room. The total expense for the remodeling came to $1,117. So they actually made $15. A plaque carved by Frank Arthur of Charlotte and placed above the entrance to the room carries the date January 1st, 1927, and the words "A Son's Tribute" under the names of Edward Goodman Holden and Jean Stansbury Holden. On January 6, 1927, the directors held their first meeting in the new reading room. This is a favorite still. The room's large arching bay type windows on the side, and the fireplace is still a favorite place for reading as a reading area in the library. We have people come in and we'll spend all day reading the periodicals and newspapers, sit in there, put their feet up and read all day long because it's a nice room to read in. A little warm in the summer, but it's a nice room to read in. Also in 1930, and it's the old room, in 1930, men were finally admitted as associate members. They weren't full members, they could be associate members. Upon the withdrawal, they had to withdraw from the General Federation of Women's Clubs due to time, energy, and money, which is what I said in this book, but and the view that they were unable to fully cooperate with Federation rules. And I don't know whether it was a thing where they wanted men to join, or they wanted to be allowed to join, or if it was that altogether, they just didn't have the money and funding to follow the rules the Women's Federation did. So they were actually allowed to join. Also, during that time, in 1930, the other interesting thing I found was that was when they first started, the idea for starting an endowment was first mentioned, which is very interesting when you think about it being 1930. Of course, the Depression was just starting. Once members realized that the club's prosperity was due mainly for people supporting them, giving them gifts, and they thought, this might not last, or it may cease completely with their financial instability all the whole nation. It was decided that at the end of each year, once all the outstanding debts were paid, any amount over $500 would be set aside and put into a fund, and they bought Liberty bonds with the money to start with, but they started the endowment with whatever they had over $500 at the end of every year, which was I just think of that and think in 1930, that was a hard time to do that, but they decided we're going to do this because we have to. And then in 1940, the club began requesting donations for their 50th anniversary. They found that people didn't have as much to give. They weren't giving as much. After 1940, that was when a lot of the civic clubs did start. The PTAs and the Rotary clubs and Kiwanis and a lot of other civic clubs were beginning to start, so they weren't needing the Lanier Library. They weren't getting as much money as they got before. So they had to start asking for donations. So they decided to set up a permanent book fund. Before this, up until 1938, 1939, the club had operated within its income from charging 25 cents for a tea or a luncheon or some other program, 25 cents I think for the programs to come in. But with the steadily rising costs of cost of living and cost of books and everything, they found that they had to start asking for donations, which that's amazing that took that long too. What do you have a picture of? That was the circulation desk used to be in the front, along the front where the Lanier books are now, and the door, that's the wall there is kind of where the door from Melrose is now. So it used to be across the front. Other library additions. The name Lanier Club was changed to the Lanier Library Association in 1956. That was shortly before, before I get that, 1958 when they discovered the rare Nathaniel Hawthorne book, Fanshawe, in the collection. It was a book after Hawthorne became famous. He didn't like his first book, Fanshawe, so he bought up all the copies and had them destroyed. I think is what the story is. And when they found one in the Lanier collection, it was so rare, they took it to New York and it was sold at auction for $2,600. So. So at that time. In 1967, a two-story addition was added to the back of the library, which is where the nonfiction area is, in the basement underneath the Leduc room and the kitchen below. Then and that's the kind of looking out from the nonfiction area. In 1988, the Elizabeth Grady Farwell wing was added to the front of the building. I have that, you can pass So around most of you know what it looks like if you've been in there, though. That's where our fiction area is now. And the Felburn Foundation Nature Library was added to our collection. When the Felburn Library out of 176 closed, this is right when Peter and I were starting, the Felburn Foundation called and they were closing down the library. What was his name? What was it?
Mr. Phil?
Well, no, who ran the library, he died. I can't remember what it was either, I used to know it. And when the caretakers died, they were closing down the library. It was pretty much closed before then too, and they were going to move everything out of there. So they called and talked to us, and we had a collection that we've got to go in and choose books from their collection. Barb and Sandra, some other people went in and we got the books and brought them, and they're now downstairs in our Leduc room, and it's like all the nature books, and so it's a neat collection that's down there. In addition, the library also houses a wonderful collection of sculptures and paintings and pottery and portraits and Tryon toy maker items. We have a booklet that lists all of them, including the painting Due from Lynn Court in Tryon by Mazinovich, the sculpture of Mercury, Tryon toy maker toys, the old lady in the who lived in a shoe, Edward Ryerson's oil, Sidney Lanier's home in Lynn, Southern poet, which we know is really the Wilcox house. I was waiting for Robert to be here to correct me. So the booklet tells everything. I've been trying to update. That was one of my tasks for this year, was to try and update to make sure everything was still in the same place. Because when I look at it, you go around and I'm like, I don't know if that's that's still the same painting if they've moved them around. So I got asked Noel Guffey and Mike McHugh to come because they were instrumental in getting that done and all the estimates made on the things we have. And I asked them to come on Monday and meet me there. I said, I just want you to go over and just tell me if this book was right. You know, and those of you know Mike and Noel, I mean, they came in and it was wonderful, but didn't even get out of the first room, and they were telling me whose brother it was, and so-and-so's sister did that, and she lived here, and they were taking the paintings down and looking at the backs of them, and they were moving them around. And it was just like, I just gave up after about 30 minutes and just followed them around and listened. It was fun, but I didn't get anything accomplished with what I wanted to do. But it was okay. I learned a lot that day. It was just a different thing of learning. So they had all kinds of stuff to say about all the things in there. Very, very interesting, and all of the items and where they came from. The teapots. So some of you were there did the teapot talk, and they have all the teapots from the McIntyres. They gave the teapots that were his father's, and it's just incredible. And although we have an online catalog now, the library still maintains its card catalog, and it's still used. Those of you who aren't members, if you are members, we still also have date due cards in the back of our books that we stamp with the date due, and we also pencil in your library card number next to it, so if you come in and you get a book and you can't remember if you read it, you can look back there and look for your card number.
That is so good.
I think that's
that.
we have people say that all the time, like, I'm so glad you do that, because I can't remember if I read it.
Amber, does the other libraries do that?
Do the other membership libraries or public libraries? Public libraries don't at all. The membership libraries, well, and I'm getting ready to talk about them too. The membership libraries, most of them are much, much bigger than we are. And I've not heard them. I think I told them that the first year that I went to the membership library group meeting that we still stamped them, and they all laughed. They all thought that was just charming and wonderful that we still doing that, but I don't think so. Most of them are a lot bigger than ours. Not all of them, but most of them are. I don't know how we started that. But, the library continues to host at least 2 free cultural or literary programs per month. We usually have it on the first Thursday and the third Tuesday. Those vary a little bit. We have a 6 o'clock program on Thursdays and a noon program on Tuesdays. They're open to the public. But they're open to anybody and they're all free, so anybody can come. But if you're a member, we especially invite you to get notices about it in an email newsletter. In addition, the library hosts a mystery festival in October, a ticketed mystery festival, and the Sidney Lanier Poetry Celebration in April, which we're going to have a big celebration again next year. We have an annual program and a summer family program are supported with the help of the Kirby Endowment Fund at the Polk County Community Foundation. This year, author Mary Alice Monroe has scheduled 2 fundraising events for the library. The first was a national book launch that most of you know about. It was held in early June, and another one is scheduled for November, where she will have Cassandra King, who is Pat Conroy's widow, who wrote a book of Tell Me a Story, I think is the name of it. So she talks about her life with Pat Conroy. So she'll be here in November the end for that. And we have the Best Members Holiday Party, and I said, if this is in the country, I think I meant to say in the county, but I thought, no, it might be in the country too, because it's a pretty good holiday party. We've had it before Christmas. And the last 2 years that I've been there, when we had it scheduled was, of course, when the snow before in December came. And it got rescheduled both years, and it was crazy trying to get the word out to do that. So, and last year, it ended up being the weekend after Christmas or the weekend after New Year's. And everybody's like, this is great. There wasn't anything going on. I didn't have any conflicts. It was a nice time to have it. So we've decided that's when we're going to have our holiday party. It's going to be the first weekend in January from now on. So, from 1890 to 2019, the Lanier Library remains one of only a few membership libraries left in the country. There are now officially 17. We actually voted in a new one last year that just started in Seattle. They're all in places like Seattle, New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, Charleston, San Francisco, Tryon. To be considered, it's amazing. I mean, it really is. To be considered a membership library, we must be financially, I don't know if I have this on here or not, financially self-supporting, cannot be part of a larger organization, so you can't be, I went to one in Philadelphia. It was a private library, so I knew it was private, and I thought, well, is this it? And I went in, and I think it was part of the university or of a bigger organization or another historic organization in Philadelphia. It must provide a circulating library to its members. The membership libraries group meets once a year in the fall to share ideas and discuss their commonalities. There are a lot. First, I'll tell you the differences. In 17 membership libraries, they're a very interesting group too, because we have some of the same problems, but they're very different. Like the one in La Jolla is a music and art library, so they do all kinds of, everything is involved around that, and they have a lot of wealthy things going on all the time. San Francisco and Portland, Maine had mechanics libraries and institutes. They were formed for craftsmen and apprentices. That's what they were formed for, those kind of things at the very beginning, for apprentices to come in and get things to learn their trade. Portsmouth is a maritime library. I mean, Charleston's just historic because it has all these historic documents from Charleston. But they're very different, but then they're very easy. And as a member of the Lanier Library, you can access these other membership libraries if you go to them. You probably can't check out. Most of them won't allow you to check out. But and even New York's and Boston, they were sort of like, we don't even have time to have people even come in, but if you come in and say you're a member, we'll give you a tour. But most of them will say, oh yeah, you can come in and use our facilities and do all this stuff too, and we provide the same thing. The membership libraries group that does meet in just a few, in the past few weeks, some of the common things that we've had emails, we have like an email group, and 2 things that came up, they were asking, does anybody else do auto renewals? And this came up at a board like 2 times ago at the board meeting, that somebody was saying, can we do auto renewals? And we're like, no, we don't keep any of that information. So those of you we don't keep any of that information in any of our computer stuff. And it was funny because even the really big places, I think New York and Providence, I think both of them were like, no, we don't keep any of that information, any of the financial information, or we don't want to do that for our members. We don't, because then to be able to automatically renew every year, you have to keep all that. And it was funny that they were saying the same thing, that no, we're not going to do that. Filming and photographing individuals at our programs, and how did we deal with that? Do you put up a sign? Do you have people sign a waiver every time because they had people who didn't like their picture being used in something? And we had one member who didn't like their picture was used in something and let us know about it. So it was kind of a common thing, but it's very interesting, things that are the same. And last year, I was very happy when I went to the meeting to hear that in all the other libraries, whether Charleston or San Francisco or New York, all the directors helped set up chairs at the programs. That was supposed to be different. The libraries had, I believe, 24 librarians plus 8 administrators or directors over the years. The first librarian was hired around 1916 for $50 a year. I think that was Miss Rachel Oliver, and she was there from 1916 to 1926. So, and they raised it to $100 a year later on. It hasn't changed a whole lot. Prior to that, the library had been run by member volunteers all the time, so including the postmistress when it was housed in the post office. In the beginning, fees were 15 cents a quarter. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. Today, they're $50 for individuals, $75 for household per year. But when you think about it, that's the cost of 2 to 3 books anymore. For a hardback book, that's the cost of 2 books. So, and you can get more than that at the Lanier. We have a board of directors with 9 members. We have 5 part-time employees, 400, right around 400 memberships, and Barb's going, oh, why can't they do it? It's still fluid because we have some that don't renew and then some that do, but it's right, we've got it right within. Trying to increase it to $500 in our 130 by 130 campaign, which in 2020 is our 130th anniversary. And at the end of last year, we started trying a campaign to try and get 130 new members. So if you know anybody who would like to join, or if you'd like to join, or if you know somebody you'd like to give a gift membership to, they'll be added to our campaign for 130 new people. It's open 6 days a week and closed on Mondays, but we are open on Sundays from 1 to 4 p.m. So it's a real popular day in the library. The past and present. Today, the Lanier Library continues with its mission of providing library services as well as literary and cultural activities to its community. We truly enjoy bringing the best of the literary arts to our library to share with everyone. We are that membership library. We are fortunate to have a modest endowment, the idea which was first established in 1930 by those insightful folks. Now, over the years, modest funds were added to the endowment with a few substantial contributions from bequests and memorials along the way, such as past President Miss Helen Jane Stearns in 1957. There was a big endowment bequest then, and as well as many others along the way. The endowment enables the library to have a nice fund to draw from to continue, because our membership dues do not cover the cost of keeping the library open. It's an old building, first of all, where if you've been by it lately, you've seen they took all the gutters off, we're redoing the soffits and the fascia boards and fixing all that stuff. We got a new parking lot. We had new plumbing. For the number of hours we are open each week, we have the equivalent of, what you said, Tommy, today, how'd you put that, 2.5 employees, paid employees, because they're 5 part-time. All of us are part-time. Sandra's there all the time, but she only works 30 hours a week too. The library has always raised money for charging for programs or teas or luncheons. It's rented out space, which it still does, with the Leduc room. The Leduc room, and that was interesting to find out, the Leduc room was originally, when it was first there, they rented it out, rented to a travel agency. It was the first home of the Polk County Community Foundation until they got their new home. one of the funny things I found, they had a vacuum, way back when vacuums were first starting, they had a vacuum cleaner donated to them. They rented out their vacuum cleaner because it was the only one, about the only one in town. And it rented for 50 cents for the first 3 days and 75 cents for every day after that. But they didn't charge the churches to use it, so. It was, our current board has done really well. Current board's done really well with keeping within the budget. We're attempting to get to 4% or less drawdown on our endowment. Our membership dues for the 400 members that we have would realistically be $450 per year if we were paying all of our annual operating costs, which can't do with, and we can't charge that much, and we don't want to charge that much, but that's how much really would be if we were doing it. It's long been an issue at the library. I did find, let's read this to Peter today, the member who regularly pays his dues in the Lanier Library, I think this is around what, 1957, I think, regularly pays his dues in the Lanier Library for a year for active membership, may borrow each year books and periodicals worth many times that amount. Yet the sum realized from this source, membership, does not meet more than half the annual budget of the association. Right now, it would be more like 25% of the annual budget with the dues would be, but so it's always been a problem. It's always been something they had to deal with, I guess, well, at least after the 1940s. Considering all the things the Lanier Club did throughout the years for this community, and including the literacy campaigns and the health information initiatives and the educational events of all kinds, it's a rather astounding feat for a small town like this, and that it got started when there were 24 houses in town. Being one of the 17 membership libraries in the United States, all in much larger places with greater populations for support of a library like this, we have reason to be proud of that it's here. We maintain our collection. We have a media selection committee that is they're avid readers and great at choosing the books that our members like. They know what the people like. They know what to ask for. They scour the periodicals reading the reviews of books, and they find books that they think we want to get. The Lanier Library remains a main source of intellectual and cultural stimulation for this community. Some of our programs we've had, I learned something at every one of our programs. I've been astounded. In the last year, it's been really interesting to learn something from all of them. But we're still bringing our community the best of the literary arts, and we're at least trying to, so hopefully we're doing it. And I'm out of things, I think. I'm sorry, my sides were a little messed up on that myself, but I'll really fast. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Does anybody have any questions?
You had such a clever idea for the 130 new members. You put a book, a special stand with their names on them. How many, can you tell us how many new members?
We have 92
Oh, so
far.
we're really close.
We're pretty close. Now that is, again, like keeping the one that we're going back to is like last August, is making sure we're trying to keep all those people, because we started officially last August. So trying to make sure we're going back and keeping all those. There's a few that we probably won't, so it may be, end up being a little bit less than
But
that.
that's really close,
But
that's great.
That is very close, and I feel really pleased.
Amber, what are the dues at comparable membership libraries around the country? Do you have a sense of that?
Almost all of them. Oh, I have that. Oh, you should have asked me. You did ask me that, didn't you?
What I'd like to say
1,200?
is the Boston Athenaeum is $2,500 a year or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, most of them are over, I want to say
Yeah.
$295 is like a going rate for most of them.
When I was on the board years and years ago, the dues were $12 a year. And I said, this won't work. We need to raise the dues. So, nope, can't do that.
Yes,
Can't
that
do
was,
and I suspect that's still the argument going on.
Yeah.
the board.
it was
Because
a
if
big
it's 50,
thing.
there's no reason, if it's 50 now, there's no reason why it wouldn't be 100. I don't know what kind of pushback you get, people saying, I can't afford to belong to the library.
Right.
But I think you also have on your renewal card an opportunity for people to make a contribution along with the
Yes.
measly $50 that you charge for all the services.
Yes.
That's actually, and our members contribute about as much again on top of their membership as they do. So Amber said that 25% of the operating expenses are dues. The members contribute an additional 25% on top of that, and then the balance is sourced
Endowment.
from our endowment and
Requests.
requests and foundation gifts.
Amber, would you mention something about the Tryon Diary so people will participate?
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I need to go back and add that in. In January, Robert Lang had put together a Tryon diary from the old, like he had found the old ones that were Miss Grady's, right?
There were Miss Grady's.
And-
There were Lily, but yeah, Wilcox's.
And he thought we needed to have something where people are just coming in and writing down things that occur, and things that are happening in our, and that might get lost in the thing. So we have the Tryon Diary, a big book, I think it's in there now, he gave it back to me, where it sits on a stand like this in the Grady room, in the fiction room. And you can go in and write, there's a pen there, you can open it to a page and just write something.
It's a beautiful
It's a
handmade
gorgeous book.
with hand marble pages
It's
and absolutely stellar calligraphy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, done New Year's Eve, the night before it was presented.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you, Robert, for bringing it.
Who did that calligraphy?
I do not know.
Julia did it.
Nobody knows.
Julia did it.
Nobody knows.
First you don't count.
It is, but it's full thing. I mean, somebody who came in, they wrote a big long thing about the Melrose Fire. I mean, and talking about
That's
the
great, but
community
that's
and
what
doing
it's
that,
for.
and that is the kind of
It's
thing that it's
wonderful.
for.
It's wonderful.
So if you think of anything, or just want to talk about
I'll say it's a
something that's
beautiful
going on,
day.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we need to make some entries about the sesquicentennial coming up, the Founder's Day.
Is the library keeping up with the electronic forms of entertainment, the videos and the books on tape and stuff?
Yes, that's like our second most popular thing checked out are the DVDs, which is like not up to technology, but our members still they like their DVDs.
We don't
and they come
stream.
to it. They don't stream, not yet. We still have a card catalog too. And it's kind of nice, but every week there's somebody comes in and they really like that we only have 2 computers for the patrons to use, and that I like this, that you have the card catalog still, and that you do this, and we do have Wi-Fi. It's free Wi-Fi. People do come in and use our Wi-Fi, and we have an extension. Thank you to Barb, she got us onto a really good one that was working.
Well, thanks for maintaining that card catalog. It's
I-
so,
Yeah.
it's so it's comforting. It's almost as comforting as having a Rolodex on your desk.
Well, we also have one of those up at the desk. We have a Rolodex with all the members' numbers of cards that they use that up too.
Who remembers that?
Grandchildren are fascinated by
Is
it,
it-
totally fascinated by it.
Is it labor intensive in a way to maintain the card catalog?
We still get when we order books, we order them through Baker and Taylor, and they actually will still send the cards with it if you request them. I'm not sure, it might cost us a little bit for them to do it, but we still get them.
Yeah.
And Lynn types up a lot of them sometimes too, but wonderful,
On her manual typewriter.
on your radio. With, Ann Sellers and Eileen Morgan come in every Wednesday, and Art Marquis also comes in when Sandra has cards or Lynn has some cards to do, and they give them to their experts at going through the card catalog and taking them out, and putting the new ones in and putting them back, and so we have.
I don't think younger people could do that.
No,
You have to have somebody.
and they said last week before last, I think there was a gentleman who, he was younger than me, so I mean a lot younger than me, probably in his 40s, but 30s maybe. He came in with his son, and the internet was down, and they were asking about a book, and Sandra said, "Oh, but we have a card catalog," and she said, "You can look there." And she said, "I don't think but said the dad went over there, and he didn't know how to use it, so she had to go over and show him how to find it. There's no app on his phone."
And Emma, we're so truly appreciative of you. I'm so glad you're at Lanier. I really mean that. Lanier Library is truly a diamond in the rough. It really is. And if anybody in this room is not a member, you should be, because it is such a special place.
It is.
I mean, it really is. I mean, I know your job is big, because I did the programs there for 6 years, and I'll tell you, it was hard, but it was the most enjoyable time in my life. It really was. It was truly wonderful. And so I love it. I really do. It's a great place.
It is.
Really
And
is.
I mean, just the history of it is amazing. I mean, I'm like, I won't paint any of it. I laughed yesterday in the board meeting where we're talking about the libraries, and I said, wait, you know, we're not going to pan the public library. First of all, Sandra's husband, Bob, works at the Saluda Library, and my husband, Jeff, works for him there. So we've got both up the
You
mountain
got it
and down the
covered.
mountain covered with libraries. So we don't pan the public libraries either. I think we're all in this together, but just the things, it's such a community library. Some people come in every day, you know, they're in there all the time, and it's just a friendly place. And Sandra is the face of the library in there doing that.
And just the thing that really gets me, I have to say this, just think how hard it was for those women to start the library, because, I mean, like, even after they got the building, they had to sort through all the mud.
The mud, yes.
I mean, the mud, and it had to be cold, and then when they got there, they had to take their boots and everything
Right.
off, and can you imagine those long dresses?
Yes.
And I mean, I can't imagine.
One
Then they had
of the big things that they talked about was when they added the powder room. Before it had a mirror and anything, but the powder room was a huge success because they could come in through the mud and everything, and they could change out of their mud boots and they change into nicer, change their skirts and have from their riding gloves to their kid gloves, and so that was just a huge deal when they
And it
could
was
do
so
that.
funny, the rules that they had. So I forget now, sometimes they were allowed to tilt their chairs and put their feet on the fender of the stove. And sometimes they said, no, you're not allowed to.
Not allowed to do
You're
that.
not allowed to tilt your chairs
think it
and
was
put
what-
your feet on the fender.
It was
of
when they had
stove.
the programs at one of the churches, and they said the chairs were so uncomfortable in the churches, they made the rule that they could tilt the
Tilt the
chairs.
chairs. I love that.
And it is funny, the things that they had in minutes and things that they did to.
Do our local schools have field trips to the library?
Well, only Tuesday school right now at this time. We do have story times for Tuesday school, and they come down and come in. But they do, and that is something, they used to have all the Tryon schools used to come to the library and join, and they had, I think they gave memberships to the teachers and everything, but that was before the Polk County Library was there in Columbus and stuff, so. Having been a school teacher for a lot of years, they don't do a lot of stuff like that in schools
And I think it's neat
anymore.
that you encourage the dogs to come in.
That's-
You know, that's something, that was not allowed, you know?
Before, they do, yes, we do allow dogs to come in on leashes, and if they're well behaved, and they love that, so. We have dog treats behind the counter. That's great.
So is the library available to everybody, whether they're members or not?
Well, it's everybody is welcome in the library. You can't check out unless you have a membership, but everyone is available. The programs are free and open to all, so. Indeed. And I do have some brochures here if you'd like to see, and we have also another one that has all of our programs that we've had this year, so it's got a list of everything that we've done or will be doing, so it's just kind of to show all the things that we've done. I do have, we have many copies of these books, whether you're, that you can check out, but if you're wanting to borrow them, we just had somebody bring in 2 today. When these came out on the anniversaries, this was the diamond anniversary for the, what's that, 75 years, I guess, and then this was 100 year for 25 years more. They're written both a little differently. This one is more of a narrative, I guess, and it has all the programs from the beginning in the back. It has the list of all the board members in the back. It has all the lists of the librarians that were there during that time in the back. I mean, and then just like this tells the story of the library through decades. of telling what happened in this decade and what did. So, I mean, I'd love to, get something else like this together. It's just the time-consuming part of it. But we have, and somebody just brought in a copy of each one of them, because I think when they came out, they gave them to all their members. And as members are dying, we have people bring them in a lot. And Sally McPherson over at Steps to Hope brought us some. She said, somebody turned them in over here. Do you guys want these? So we have several copies of these that are not cataloged and several that are cataloged. So if anybody ever wants to borrow one for a night, you're welcome to take these or read them if you'd like. So there are fascinating, kind of the history of Tryon in there too. So thank you.
Thank you.